Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL Draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers. Today, we're going to be taking a look at my first full draft rankings article for the 2024 NHL Draft class. I am your host, Logan Horn, and today I am joined by my co-host and fellow prospect analyst, Matthew Zator. How are you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing good. The team I cover, the Canucks, are flying high, so it's been good. And the prospects, I've said a few times there. This past week, none of them did super crazy. It was a little bit of a quiet week there, but the NHL team's doing really well, so doing very good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I know it's just the start of November, but does it feel nice just on the fan side to not have to worry about prospects in the draft next year quite so early? I feel like there've been some rough starts in Vancouver in the last few years where it's like, all right, well, who's going to be in the top 10 this year? Is it nice to kind of be free from that a little?
It is nice not having to write an article about looking at early draft targets already. I know I was doing that last season. I was already started. Is it too early to start talking?
Yeah, that's a rough one. Yeah, you'll get there eventually, but it's nice to have some time before that. Awesome. Our regular co-host here, Peter Baracchini, will not be with us this week, as you've likely noticed already, but he'll be back soon, so stay tuned for more Peter. I'm excited to see him again, but yeah, we'll give him some time away. All right. I want to mention just before we hop in here to the draft ranking stuff that the Hockey Writers, we've recently added a lot of new content with a Substack dedicated to every NHL team, as well as a general one for each day's best articles on the whole site. As a fan of NHL prospects and draft prospects and stuff like that, you won't want to miss any of the great content we produce. And we actually have an NHL draft and prospect Substack that makes it really easy to stay caught up on all that. So if you sign up, you get all of the best prospect and draft stuff that we make every day sent out to your email inbox a couple times throughout the week. And we also have a premium tier with exclusive articles, mailbags, prospect interviews, and more. You can find a sign-up link in the description below. All right, Matt, we're going to hop in with draft rankings from 2024. We're just going to look at the top 5 first. We won't dwell too long on these prospects because we've already talked about them a ton. I will say mine have already changed a little bit since this article came out like a week ago or so. So I'll mention that in a second. But Macklin Celebrini is number 1, Cole Yzerman at 2, Ivan Demidov at 3, Anton Salayev at 4, and Sam Dickinson 5. I'll say Salayev actually might be at 3 for me now. Might be at 2 for me now also. I don't know. We'll see. There'll be more draft rankings to come from me. But what are your thoughts on this top 5 here? Anyone you might sneak in here instead?
I mean, Salayev is really I'm the same thing. I mean, he could be rising up for me as well. And I still have Celebrini and Yzerman 1, 2, like you got right now. But Salayev maybe a 3 at this point. But the top 5 is still the top 5. I don't really see a guy kind of sneaking in yet. I mean, that could change, obviously. But this top 5 is pretty much my top 5, except for maybe Salayev being at 3rd right now.
Sure. Yeah. Salayev is a really interesting prospect, as we've talked about. Came out of nowhere, seemingly. Is going to beat his production from the juniors last year in the KHL this year, most likely, which is just an absurd idea. But to get a 6'7" prospect who skates as well as he does, who produces as much offense as he does, which isn't an incredible amount, but he's a 17-year-old until the spring, and he's playing in the KHL. So what more can he ask for? He is still outscoring Dmitry Simashev, who was drafted, I think, 6th overall last year. He's bigger. He skates at least as well, defends as well, is more physical, is better offensively. So yeah, he's gonna do pretty well this year in the draft. And he's not on Macklin Celebrini's level for me right now on talent, but I could hear an argument for him going first already. I think, having someone in Celebrini who projects as like a star centerman in the NHL is going to go first 9 times out of 10 for most teams. I think that makes the most sense. And they have more control over his development because Salayev has, I think, 2 more years on his contract in the KHL after this year. Who knows if he'll sign longer or if he'll come over. But that seems like a real possibility to me right now. And we'll see how that continues to develop, though. But lots to watch there. We'll move on quickly from that because we've talked about all those guys a bunch. So let's get to some of the names we talk about a little less often. The rest of the top 10 goes Berkeley Catton at 6, Artyom Levshunov at 7, Konsta Helenius 8, Carter Yakimchuk 9, and Adam Yurachek 10. So there are 3 defensemen there, 5 defensemen so far in my top 10, which I hadn't really thought about yet. But that's something we'll talk about in a little bit, I know, because there was the expectation that this year's draft would be strong defensively, and it's already beaten those expectations significantly in my eyes. But the rest of this top 10 here, Matt, let me ask you about Berkeley Catton. So, I mean, he's the top player here playing in the WHL, even though last year we saw a ton of high-scoring early picks from the Dub. But Catton seems to be the top one right now. What are your thoughts on his game early on? And I mean, the points are still coming, which is a positive.
Yeah, it's great, especially after what a season he had last season in the WHL as a 17-year-old. I mean, he had you wouldn't expect that from a guy like in his draft -1 year. And coming in, you say, well, what is he going to do for an encore? Well, he's done pretty well. I mean, first he was great for the Hlinka Gretzky, and then he just kind of continues that into the season and is running the show basically. And such a great shot. I've seen a few clips of him with that shot, and that's going to be a big thing for him. And biggest thing that stood out to me in his first year was his face-offs. I mean, that's something that you usually develop and struggle with, especially as a young player with that type part of the game as a centerman. That's why sometimes these guys don't stay as centers. They move to the wing because they can't win draws. They're not strong enough to be down the middle. But it looks like Catton is doing pretty well in that position. So we'll see if he can keep that going. But I love Catton. I think he has the potential to be even. Like I said, well, I don't know about a guy going to the top 5. I think he could potentially move into that top 5 discussion. But right outside of it, like you got him at 6. I think that's a good spot for him. But I'm excited to see what he can do for the rest of the season, potentially even at the World Juniors. Most likely he'll have a good chance of being on that team. We'll see what he does there. But yeah, I'm excited for the rest of his season because I'm off to a great start.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last year we had lots of guys up at the top to watch on that kind of prototype of the smaller, skilled, high-scoring forward. We had Bedard, Cristal, Benson, Riley Height. This year, there's not so many to watch, but Catton seems to be there. He's not the smallest. I think he's around 5'11" right now. Although that does, like you said, that could be part of something that makes it hard to see him as a center going forward. But I'm glad you mentioned that the face-offs because, yeah, usually you just see like prospects as they get a little older, they get the strength, they get the repetitions, and then they start to figure out face-offs. And then they go pro and they have to get better and better and they have to catch up again. But for Catton to be so strong there really early on definitely bodes well for him. Even if it means that 2-3 years from now when he goes pro, it's still going to be a rough thing for a while. But at least he's got a bit of a jump on his peers right now, it seems. So that's positive. I am gonna shout out Artyom Levshunov as well, who's been tearing up college hockey early on this year. I've actually got quite a good number of players here playing college hockey, which is always fun in the draft year because it's really competitive. And us living in North America, it's easy to get a lot easier to view than certain leagues, especially in Europe. And it's fun to just see some clips on a Friday night of like Max Celebrini scoring 2 goals again. Oh, no way. But Levshunov has been great as well. He's 6'2", he's got a right shot, skates pretty well. The offense is definitely the selling point for him right now. The defense isn't as great as you would hope. He is still, I mean, he's on the old side for this year's draft, but he is still young. He's 18. Lots of time to develop that. He's got the frame, the mobility, the reach. Just the willingness hasn't always been there. The compete level isn't always showing defensively, but offensively he's been killer. He's been dynamite, and I think a top 10 pick is a pretty safe spot for him at this point. Kind of similar, honestly, with Carter Yakimchuk, who's just a few below him. And if you just swapped the leagues that they were playing in and gave them each other's points, I'd probably swap them. I just have it at this point because Levshunov is playing against stiffer competition and succeeding as well, if not maybe a little better than Yakimchuk. But with that said, Yakimchuk is going to be like top 5 in defenseman scoring in the WHL this year as a draft eligible, which is ridiculous.
And look at the right-hand shots too. I mean,
I know
all 3 of these guys that are in this this set. Adam Juracek, another right-hand shot. All these right-hand shot defensemen, and they're supposed to be rare. Yeah. Well, not in this draft.
Not this year. Yeah, it's a wild group. It feels strange. We'll talk about it in a bit, but it feels like we've kind of just the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction from last year, where we had tons of great forward prospects in the top 10, top 16, first round in general, and not a lot of good defensive prospects. Yeah. And now it's the opposite, because in this top 10, there is one prospect that I feel confident will be an NHL centerman in Celebrini. And there's 2 guys who could maybe be centermen, Berkeley Catton, Consta Helenius. 3 out of the top 10 picks as at least being deemed centerman coming into the draft is very low. That is not common in the NHL draft. But, lots can change. But, you got to balance it anyway. So didn't get many defensemen last year. So we're just a dominant group this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. I personally love defensemen. That's my position. I always gravitate towards defense, even though it's maybe not the flashiest position. But so this is like, I'm in heaven this year. This is going to be great. I can't wait for the rest of the year.
Unless you're Quinn Hughes, then flashy is the...
That's true. Unless you're Quinn Hughes, then flashy counts still.
Yeah.
Not always the flashy position, at least. I guess I'll have to clarify. Yeah. All right, we'll wrap up the top 16 here. The rest of the top half, the lottery picks, if I'm going to steal some, and I am going to. I'm going to steal some lingo from the NBA, where the lottery picks are the picks made by teams who are in the lottery that aren't in the playoffs. Top 16. At 11 is Caden Lindstrom, and this is another person that's moved since I ranked him here. I can promise you this: that the next time I release the draft rankings, he'll be in my top 10. I've just been blown away with his game so far this year. A little bit raw still, but has a ton of potential. 12 is Michael Brandsegg-Nygard. 13 is Henry Muse. 14, Ryder Ritchie. 15 is Aaron Kiviharu. And 16, I have Zane Parekh. Also someone who will probably rise the next time this comes out. Matt, anyone there stand out? Anyone you want to give a shout out to?
I mean, we've talked about a few guys. I'll go a bit more into Lindstrom because that was one guy I noticed rising up quite a bit. I don't know. I can't remember what you had him on from your last one, but I know he wasn't in this range. But yeah, we talked about centerman, and there's not a lot of guys in this one, and Lindstrom though could be one of the better ones. coming out of this. And one thing that really stands out is his size, because 6'5", 205, that's pretty good for a guy that down the middle. And, we're talking about strength and size, and a lot of the time when you're looking at centermen, you need that. You need that type of a frame to be able to succeed. I mean, there are some smaller centermen that are able to do it, but to be good defensively, and Lindstrom is that. He's got that good two-way potential. Could potentially be maybe a JT Miller type centered in the future. Because power forward, he can also be a guy that can play that finesse game as well. So I mean, I'm excited to see what Lindstrom can do coming up, because he does have a projectable game for the NHL that could potentially be a top line, second line center down the road. So I do think he does rise out of this 11 and go into the top 10 at some point, because I think he's definitely a top 10 pick, just what he's done so far here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a few people in the kind of draft world on Twitter with some early rankings coming out. I've seen him in the top 5 a couple times, which just tickles me. I think that's hilarious. I don't think it's crazy. I maybe need a little more time or a little more of a nudge before I can go quite that far, but I like the pick, and it sounds like the kind of thing an NHL general manager would do. It's like, do you want someone who's 5'11" and scored 100 points, or do you want someone who's 6'5" and scored 85 points? Like, they're going to take the giant, who, could be like a top 6 power forward, like you were saying. That is a huge deal. And from what we know about NHL teams and how they draft, I think it's safe to say he's going to go very early.
Yeah.
Going to make someone very happy. I think he's going to be a great prospect in the NHL. Let me see. Aaron Kiviharu, I want to mention again, just because I feel bad about it, but I know he's just going to keep falling on my list, not by any fault of his own, just simply because he's not going to be playing for a while. He's out hurt. He's not going to be playing, so he's not going to improve. You're going to see a lot of other prospects establishing themselves and improving, and they'll start to overtake him. So that's my disclaimer. If you see him lower than this next time, it's not because he got worse. It's just because everyone else got better, and he hasn't had the chance to show that he's better. As we've said before, he's got tons of skill. He's on the small side, not an elite skater. He's a good skater, but for his size, you'd kind of wish he was an elite skater. Great hockey sense. He's going to be a good offensive player, especially if his skating gets a little better. The defense is a complete question mark. Like, is he going to be a horrible defender? Is he going to be average? It's really hard to say at this point. So I would not, this might be a hot take, but I would not be surprised if he doesn't go in the first round, just simply because of the risks involved, partly because of missing time with an injury, but also just the size. Teams do not like drafting defensemen under 5'10", as we've talked about here before. I think it would be a mistake to let him fall out of the first round. Let me be clear. I think that would be a bad thing, but I think it could definitely happen.
Yeah.
And then one last person from this group I want to mention is Zator Parekh, who I mentioned he will be rising most likely. Probably the best offensive defender in this group, except maybe for Lev Shunov. The problem with Parekh, he's great offensively, great shot. He scored 20 goals last year, something like that, which is absurd for a 16-year-old. But he does not defend. It's not that he's bad at defending. He just doesn't really do it. Like, I've suggested to some friends, like, only half joking, that maybe he should be a forward. He just really casually back checking sometimes. He cheats for offense and then kind of gives up on the play a lot of the time. And it's kind of rough to watch. He's got to work on that compete level, but his offense is so good that even with that, you kind of take it, because he produces so much offensively, especially on the power play. But he's the kind of guy you need to pair with not just a defensive defenseman, but like a a defenseman that almost like sits at like the center ice line and just waits to like recover back, because it's a little scary watching him pinch up. I do believe he produces enough offense that, given enough time to develop his defensive game and actually follow the systems a little better, I think he can be an okay defender, even at the NHL level eventually. We've seen plenty of talented offensive defenders getting away with being not so good defensively. That works in all levels. You just have to find the right balance of it. And I think he'll find that. He's got too much offense for like, there are teams that are going to want him to figure it out. They're going to want to work with him. So they will.
Yeah. I mean, coaching's a big thing too. If you get the right coaches to teach them some of the, and I've said this before in the show too, is that you can teach defense. Offense, not so much. I mean, you can teach how to do certain things, but if you don't have that innate instincts, you're probably not going to turn into an amazing offensive defenseman. Like,
yeah, you can learn systems, but you have to shoot the puck 10,000 times to be able to shoot like these guys can.
Yeah.
You can learn systems a little quicker than that in most cases. So yeah, I agree with you there. Anyone else anywhere in the top 16 you want to mention before we take a quick break and move on here?
I mean, Brandsegg-Nygard we've talked about. I really like him. He's got that ability to be at worst a middle six guy. I think he could be a top six, but has a lot of skill and that ability to be into that middle six, bottom six as well. So I've really liked him. So I'll just mention him for a sec there too.
Nice. That's a great one. Big fan of him as well here. Okay. We are going to take a quick break and then hop back in with the back half of the prospect rankings, not as detailed, but then also just some larger questions about the draft. So I just want to mention again that the Hockey Writers has expanded our content to include Substacks, and that includes an NHL Draft and Prospect Substack, where you can sign up and you will receive a message in your inbox a couple times throughout the week, loaded with the best prospects and draft content we have. And that's all free, but there is also a paid tier if you would like, a premium tier where you can get prospect interviews, exclusive articles, exclusive mailbags, all that kind of stuff, and a lot more, exclusive podcasts possibly in the future. Lots of stuff to do there. So check it out. There's free level as well if you just want to kind of dip your toes in first. A sign-up link can be found in the video description below, so check that out. All right, so we're going to jump back in looking at my latest prospect rankings article for the 2024 NHL Draft. We're on the back half now, so this group is kind of in flux. There's a chance that a good number of these guys jump into the top 16 by the end of the year. A good number of these guys will not be in my first round at the end of the year, so I won't dwell on individual names too much here. But we'll look at just a few select names. So in a second, Matt, I'll just get anyone that piques your interest in the top group. I'll mention a couple quickly of my own. Nikita Artemonov, I think he's 17th on my list. As of recording, has 13 points in 25 KHL games. KHL games, he has 13 points. He's 17, playing in the top six. Not a ton of minutes, but he plays a big role, plays meaningful minutes, which is impressive, and has scored a lot. So he's someone to watch. Another is Charlie Ellick, Brandon Wheatking's defender, 23rd on my list here. Another big right shot defenseman. He's kind of the prototype where you have the great two-way defenseman in junior that I'm not sure will be a two-way guy in the pros. He'll probably be more defensively focused. I don't think the offense is super exciting there, but the defense is solid, the frame is solid, the mobility is good, so he'll be a first rounder probably. And then Tanner Howe, who's someone that we had no clue what to do with to start the year. It's like, is he going to be any good? Because Connor Bedard is not on the Regina Pats anymore. So is he going to be able to do anything? And he's been great. He's scoring a ton. Really tenacious, just hardworking player. He's undersized, but he's giving himself a real shot to be a first rounder this year, which is really fun to watch. I'm really happy about that. So those are just a few random ones here in the first round that I wanted to mention. Anyone stand out to you, Matt?
Well, I have to mention Cole Hudson. I 21st on the list here. I think he could be a little higher, but
Sure.
everyone knows I'm biased to smaller defensemen. But
What?
yeah, I don't know if anyone realized that watching the show in the past.
Oh.
Not just defensemen, forwards as well.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll go for it. And goaltenders. I like undersized goaltenders too.
It's funny how different the sizes for undersized are, though, because undersized goaltender is like, oh, he's only 6'1".
That's undersized. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, it's fine for a defenseman and
yeah, of course.
But yeah, Hudson, he's he hasn't done as much offensively. He's going to have to do a lot more to be able to be maybe for sure a first round pick. And we thought Lane should have been a first round pick, and he was putting him a lot more points, and he didn't get to be a first round pick. Yeah. I think, unfortunately, we've said this, he's probably going to drop down to the second round, and a team will get him, and then they'll be like, whoa, we got him in the second round, and he becomes a ridiculously good defenseman in the NHL. That's probably what's going to happen here too. But
definitely possible.
Yeah. So he's still very skilled defenseman. Very exciting to watch. So keep an eye on him. I don't know where he's going to be. He's going to end up. So he's going to be a guy we'll be talking about a lot, even on draft day. One of the rare left-hand defensemen in this group.
Yeah, that's true.
Everyone else is right. Another guy I'll just quickly mention too is he's kind of, I thought he was going to be higher just looking at his skill set, but that injury last season really derailed him. Was Michael Hage or Haig? I don't know how to say it's Hage, probably with the E, maybe.
I'm honestly not sure either. I just go where my heart leads every time I have to say his name. I should probably check.
I'm going to say Hage right now, but he's just got a lot of skill, and is a great skater, a lot of skill to his game. So I'm hoping that he can rise up this list as the year goes on here. But that first, injuries just, unfortunately, they derail these guys sometimes, and that's why they drop. Because I thought at first, he was going to be a top 15 pick for sure. But now, because I haven't really seen a lot of them yet, that's why he's low on the list. But lots of potential for him too.
Totally. I mean, there's a lot of guys here, but that's definitely one who, if you asked me a year ago, which would be, I think, just before his injury, I would have said pretty confidently he'd be in the top half of the group. Part of it is, like you said, the injury, like just small sample over the last 12 months. But as it grows, I think his draft stock will only improve. It might not improve enough to help him rise a ton, though. But yeah, ton of skill, ton of talent there. So I like Hage a lot. Haig. Someone that we talked about a few weeks ago that I want to mention here, I didn't write down where he was on my list, but is Terik Parascak. I just made my first round. I know he's towards the end of it. We talked about him a few weeks ago because he was putting up Connor Bedard numbers to start his draft year in the WHL. Maybe not quite on that pace at this point, but he's keeping the points up. He's not the fastest skater, not the most dynamic offensive threat, shoots well. He is putting himself in great positions to score consistently. So he's a smart guy, a smart kid. I don't know what to make of him because this is his first full year in the WHL, if I'm not mistaken. And so he's new to a lot of us. I personally don't watch a lot of Canadian prep hockey in my prospect scouting. But he's been really solid. I don't see a dynamic offensive threat. I don't think he'll be like a top 6 forward in the NHL. But he is tearing up the WHL and hasn't slowed down. A lot of his teammates have. We talked also about how the Prince George Cougars were just the entire like top 10 of the WHL scoring lead after a couple weeks was just the Cougars. But he's held on. He's done really well for himself. So what are your thoughts on Parascak, and do you think it'll last all year? Do you think he'll be maybe like like his teammate, like Riley Height, like the points are there, but then he slides on draft day a little, or do you think the points will fall off a bit?
Yeah, I mean, the pace he's on is still pretty crazy. I mean, he's on pace for 120 points. Yeah, at 72 goals. Yeah, I mean, he's gotten quite a few goals in this last bunch of games. He's got five goals in his last 10. Wait, if I can just count, seven games. So I mean, that's pretty crazy to have. You know what? He is tough to gauge. I mean, when you look at guys that get off to this such a big start, you're like, well, can he sustain that? Can he do it for for a whole season? It's probably not sustainable. And in junior, though, 100-point seasons are a little easier than the NHL to grab.
For sure.
But I mean, 72 goals, that would be like Connor Bedard territory from last season.
Yeah.
Be pretty crazy. I think he does slow down. I'm not really 100% sure he's going to be in the first round. Like you've got him just at 30. So, I mean, he's just there. I think he does end up being right at the end of the first, maybe early second. I don't think he drops further unless he goes on a ridiculous slump where he just doesn't do anything and starts falling off, which I don't see happening. Again, very early in the season, we're not at the quarter point. Although in the WHL are closer to the quarter mark, I think they're pretty close to quarter now. If I can just look, maybe they're 3 games. So he's 3 games away from quarter to the season. Can't remember how many games WHL plays though. I think they're in they're 68 games. So they are past the quarter point now. So, you know, it's okay. You know, when you're looking at that, he may continue. And even if he does fall off a little bit, he's still going to have quite a few points. He's got a bit of a cushion on points right now. With 30 already.
30 already.
Even if he goes on a little bit of a slump, he still end up being probably 70, 80 point range. So we'll see. Yeah. I don't know where he's going to end up. He's going to be a guy that you're going to be watching on the first day to see where he goes.
Definitely. I definitely think he's going to slow down too. I think a realistic landing spot for him is maybe like 35, 40 goals, not 70. That would be a major slowdown. So he could do more than that. I would say maybe 35, 40 is that's his true talent level probably at this point. So having such a big boost to start, even if he plays at his regular level for the rest of the year, he could probably cruise to 50 plus. But yeah, 70 was where Bedard got to last year. And obviously Parascak has a lot more help around him than Bedard did last year. So that goes a long way. And no one is under any illusion that he is Connor Bedard 2.0. No. Really, really fun story early this year. And I hope he keeps it up, and we'll see how long he does. I think it'll be fun to see someone just tearing it up like that out of nowhere. Okay, one other storyline through this draft I want to mention is the Russians. It's going to be weird. We've had the last few years, like the Russian factor has returned with Russia's war in the Ukraine, as well as just other practical issues. Part of that being because of the war, the CHL does not allow Russian and Belarusian players in the league right now, or in their leagues. So there are a lot less prospects coming over to North America that normally would. You see guys come over and get drafted out of the OHL pretty regularly in the past, in the first round, but we're not getting those now. And the MHL is notoriously difficult to scout, both for public scouts like us and private scouts. NHL teams have a difficult time getting people in those rinks that work for them. That doesn't really happen these days. But this year feels like a little different, strictly because of the amount of high-end talent in Russia this year. It feels like people are going to have to get over themselves and just watch the videotape and trust that instead of getting into the arena, if that's what they have to do. Ivan Demidov, Salayev, Chernyshov, Artamonov, Matvey Grudin, I think is one of those names as well. I don't know. There's a lot of names, and all the Russian names merged together a little bit for my poor Canadian brain. But there are a lot of talented Russians this year, and I don't know that it'll be completely different. You know, the Michkov situation was just last year. He did have 3 years post draft on his contract, and Demidov and Salayev, I think, both have 2, so that's a little less of an issue. But there is still the question mark of, can you convince them to come over 2 years from now? It's a pretty short timeline. They need to be confident if they're going to take these players so early. But Matt, what are your thoughts on the Russians this year and the possibility of the Russian factor adjusting again, maybe? I don't know.
There are a lot of guys in this, like you said, a lot of guys in this first round. And looking at the Russians there, and there's quite a few. And you can't say, well, all of them are going to drop, or teams going to be like, well, we don't want them. I mean, Lev Shunov is already here, so he's not a problem. But and he's been here, but he was in the USHL last season too. So
yeah, that's right.
You know, he's an exception. But the other guys, I mean, there's quite a few that you got in your top 32, and I don't see them all dropping off because you're worried that you're not going to be able to sign them and or not be able to get them over to North America. And you know, you're looking at the past. I mean, Matvey Michkov, they've already talked to him, and he's more than likely going to come over after his contract's over. And they, you know, Philadelphia still drafted him quite high. I mean, he did drop where everyone's like, well, yeah, you know, he should have been in the top 3 by skill alone. We said that quite a few times, but he didn't drop out of the first round. He didn't drop into the latter half of the first round. So, I mean, and we were thinking, well, maybe he could. I mean, who knows? So I don't see that. I think, you know, Demidov is still going to be drafted in the high end of that draft. Who knows? He may drop a little bit because of that problem, and Salayev, I still see in the top 10, potentially even the top 5 as well. So I don't know if it's going to be that much of a factor. I do agree. I think it's adjusting again. And, you know, you don't want to bypass skill because all these guys are going to make a difference on your team in the future. So you don't want to be looking back and saying, well, we could have had him, even if we're just, you know,
for sure,
you know, just want to take a risk. So,
it's a tough situation. Like we've heard in the past, some people, we're not hearing this from NHL teams or anything, but some people just have kind of the philosophy of, if it's close, take the guy not playing in Russia.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if it's close, but the Russian is better, are you really serving your team that well by picking the player that's not as good? It's risk management. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch this year. 2 other Russians I wanted to mention. Well, one of them whose name I slightly butchered, and then another whose name is similar. Matvey Grudin and Matvey Shuravin are both playing in Russia right now, and I think they both have chances to be first rounders, especially Shuravin, big 6'3" defender. But yeah, there's a lot of talent. So if you're not paying attention there this year, you're probably going to miss out a little bit. But we'll just see the usual suspects just paying attention there. Like, I don't know, Carolina will snag a handful of these guys in the second round or something, and they'll all be stars.
Or Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona will take
them all another
in the top
team
10.
They don't seem to have a problem.
I don't really care. Yeah. Okay. One last storyline that we talked a little bit about just earlier in the show here before we wrap up is the defensemen. So this is my first full draft rankings for the first round, all 32 picks. 14 of them are defensemen. That is a lot.
Yeah.
And lots of them are right shot D, who are on the larger side, which is NHL general managers' dreams. Those are the players that teams need right now. So they'll go higher than they maybe should on talent even. And there might be more defensemen that rise into the top 32 for similar reasons. What are your thoughts on the massive group of defensive talent this year? It's just kind of overwhelming, but it's awesome. It's kind of something that's been a hole in a lot of recent drafts. It's a major strength here.
Yeah, I mean, last draft we were saying, you know, if you're looking for defensemen, and there were times where teams kind of reached a bit to get defensemen, well, if they would just wait until this one, you could get one in the half of this draft and be pretty good.
Yeah.
Simashev has looked pretty good as a good pick. It seems like he's going to be be drafted that high. We'll see what happens when he makes it the NHL, but I still think it was a little bit of a high pick, especially when you have guys that in this draft you could get later on. But we said this is the draft. This is the year of the defenseman. I think you're going to get quite a few of these top 4 guys, and even you could get a guy in the 20s. A playoff team's going to get a guy that could potentially be a top 4, and that's crazy. So I mean, I think I don't know how many are going to be superstar Shea Weber, those types of franchise defensemen. I don't know if there's that many of those, but there's definitely some top 2, top 4 talent in here. And we haven't said that for a long time. I don't know when the last one where there was tons of defensemen off the top of my head. It may have been the Shea Weber. Actually, I don't know.
A while.
It's been a while where you've got so many high-end defensemen going in the first round. So this one could be it.
Yeah, absolutely. By my count, last year's draft had 8 defensemen in the first round, and I have a couple that were just like in my honorable mentions, and I still had 14 make it into the first round. So there's a chance we see a split between defensemen and forwards in this year's draft, like a perfect 16-16 split. I think that would be within reason with the amount of talent on the back end this year. I agree that maybe not the most like superstar level talent. Like Salayev is the only one that I see really having that potential right now, but lots of guys that could be, a handful of guys that could be top pairing if a couple things go right. And then lots of guys who have potential to be top 4 contributors in the NHL. And then lots of guys that, might be bottom 4 defenders, or like if things go really well, they're on the second pairing, but they're the more depth guy. But honestly, if you get your 6th defenseman at the end of the first round and you're a playoff team, that's a win.
Yeah.
Like we forget that sometimes, but most drafts there's 10, 15 great players in the first round. Not much more than that. So if you get a good player in the first round of a draft, like a solid player, that's a win.
Yeah. And I didn't realize Shea Weber was drafted in the second round. It wasn't a first round pick.
Right. Yeah. It's been a while. What was that? 20 years ago now, right? 2003?
2003.
Yeah. Good second round there, hey? My goodness. That's every once in a while you're like, the 2003 draft is overrated, right? And then you go back and look at it and you're like, oh no, I think we're right in thinking this is really good. Imagine you get Shea Weber in the second round. That's not fair. Anyway, who's this year's Shea Weber? Let's find out. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna wrap up our show as we like to do each week with our prospects of the week. I'll kick it off with Roger McQueen is my prospect of the week this week. 2025 draft eligible prospect, playing for the Brandon Wheat Kings. Last year was his rookie season in the WHL. He had 14 points in 55 games, which was kind of disappointing because he's 6'5", has real pedigree as a talented offensive player. Just wasn't a great start. But this year, he's tearing it up. He's over a point a game. I think he already has 19 when we're recording this. So he already has a new career high in points. I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but recently I interviewed Nate Danielson, a Red Wings prospect on the Brandon Wheat Kings, one of McQueen's teammates. And I can officially report that some guys have at least tried to start calling him Lightning as a nickname. And a couple of his teammates tried to get him to switch his number to 95, which is Lightning McQueen's, which I think is hilarious. I think he should lean into it and just really go all out and be iconic. But regardless, he's an excellent prospect. He's he was phenomenal when Danielson was in the NHL preseason, and the Wheat Kings needed someone to step up and lead them offensively. McQueen did that no problem. He's had a really great start this year. This is draft -1 year, so if he can put up 60, 70 plus points this year, that's a huge step in the right direction. Could be working towards just a monster draft year next year. Mm-hmm. So he's someone to watch out for next year. Matt, who's your prospect of the week this week?
I'm going prospects of the week, and they're probably not going to be prospects much longer, these two. But Pavel Mintyukov for the Anaheim Ducks is my main one. He's a guy that I did not anticipate to have such a start to his NHL career. He's got 8 points in 11 games to start already. Has his first NHL goal and is looking like a revelation on the back end for the Anaheim Ducks right now, who are really good to start the season. I don't know if it's sustainable, if they're going to sustain that, but a lot of their young guys are doing it. McTavish is another one that's been just ripping it up so far this season to start. And Mintyukov just leading the way on the back end. One of the many defensive prospects we've talked about on this show. And Tristan Luneau also made the team. He hasn't really stood out to me. I don't know how many games he's played, but Mintyukov has just hit the ground running and could actually be a top pairing defenseman. And I don't know, pretty soon. But yeah, he's gotten to a great start. And then my other guys, Marco Rossi, pretty close to not being a prospect anymore. But he's got 5 goals in 11 games and finally looks like that top line center that the Wild have been wanting to get for a long time. And he's finally being put on the top line. Again, I don't know how long. Dean Evason seems to be a guy that switches his lines a lot. No, he's not. He doesn't switch his lines a lot. So hopefully this is the one that he'll keep.
Hopefully this sticks.
But yeah, Rossi's I love it. And I've said it because of what he's gone through in his, not just his career, but his life, dealing with health issues and looking like the guy that was drafted 9th overall in 2020. So really happy for him to get off to such a good start this season.
Yeah, Rossi's a great one because it's become frustrating for us just watching him tear up the AHL and then not get an opportunity in the NHL. So I can only assume how frustrating and difficult that was for him. But to finally get that opportunity and to show what he can do in that opportunity, it's got to be really exciting for him. It's been a ton of fun to watch. Really, like you said, just a really great story over the last few years. Really easy to cheer for him. And yeah, Mintyukov has been phenomenal. Like relative to his team, his advanced statistics are incredible. It's a small sample in games. Actually, he plays a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
But his advanced stats and stuff are below average NHL wide, but compared to his teammates, they're phenomenal, which is usually a pretty good indicator that that's actually a really great player. Early in his career, probably isn't going to score at this rate for his whole draft year. If he does, he could win the Calder, honestly.
Yeah.
But he is going to be something special, I think. So those are some great prospects to mention there, Matt. Good calls. That will do it for us this week. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Prospect Corner. Make sure you subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel to make sure you catch all of our new episodes. And also check out our NHL Draft and Prospect Substack to stay caught up on all our new prospects content. There's a link in the description below. Thank you, Matt, as always. And thank you all for joining us on this week's episode of Prospect Corner. We'll see you next time.